called the Intention Masterclass and the Intention Experiment. And what I've been doing with both is looking at the power of group intention. And what I started out doing was working with a variety of scientists around the world who had laboratories who were willing to come on board with me doing experiments to test the power of intention to heal things in the world. And we started out small with seeds and water, trying to purify water, trying to make seeds grow faster. And then we moved on to working on the most violent areas in the world or areas of some sort of conflict to see if we could lower violence or end a war. And of our 40 experiments to date, 38 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. Now, that's pretty amazing. But what's really amazing is something else. And I just started discovering that with the peace experiments. Now, one peace experiment I did a few years ago was to heal the most violent place in America, which is officially St. Louis, Missouri. In fact, one neighborhood in particular called Fairground, that is the most violent place in America. So, and that's the kind of real estate around Fairground. So we did an intention over 6 days, just 10-minute intentions, sent it to that area. And then I worked with Dr. Jessica Utz, who is a professor of statistics at the University of California at Irvine, and a real expert in consciousness. And what happened was, during these 6 days, I invited my audience from around the world to take part in these experiments, sending intention to lower violence in this area. So I had many, many thousands of people involved. So after our experiment, Dr. Utz did an analysis, and she found 6 months afterward, we looked at violent crime as a whole, property crime as a whole, fairground property crime as a whole, and fairground violent crime over the following 6 months. And we found all the different crimes in St. Louis as a whole were going up as they had done. Property crime in fairground went up as well as it had been doing, but violent crime went down by 43%. So that was interesting, but something else happened. And that something else had to do with the thousands of participants who were part of this experiment sending intention. They filled out a survey that I always do after I do an experiment. And we found this, thousands of cases of things like this. Somebody saying a true miracle happened. It's healing the relationship between all of us, my mother and her daughters. Somebody else said his father apologized for disowning him. Things smoothed out unexpectedly with my difficult new boss, wrote somebody else. It's night and day now. My estranged son has suddenly more time for me, calls me and comes to see me after 20 years of being practically strangers. And thousands of those kinds of stories of people healing their relationships. And most incredibly, being more loving with everyone they come in contact with. That's what nearly 50% of my respondents always say. They're essentially hugging strangers. They're also experiencing all kinds of personal physical healings. One said pain in the knee completely gone. Another person who had had terrible digestion said regular digestion for the first time in 20 years. No longer experiencing sciatic pain, said someone. Anxiety and panic attacks have disappeared, said someone else. Continuing improvement to skin and relief in my hip as if I'd taken pain relief. And that has happened with every one of the, I think it's about 10 peace intention experiments I've done. Peace and healing happens in the lives of the recipients. So I began scaling this down to small groups that I call Power of 8. And when I started doing this back in 2008, I noticed that people sending intention to a member of the group with a health challenge were being healed. And I was astonished. For instance, a few years ago, I did a talk at the Mile High Church right outside of Denver. And these were people who had just participated in a Power of Eight group for just 10 minutes. Linda, for instance, reversed stage 4 lung cancer. Natalie, whose family business was crumbling, had it completely reversed right after that and suddenly got new orders for all sorts of things. Connie had terrible TMJ pain in her jaw, and that was essentially erased. Sandy was due to have a knee replacement right after her intention on a knee she could barely even walk on. She was able to do a deep squat and she could cancel her surgery. Beverly had a dislocated shoulder that began to slot into place, and Joan had problems focusing with her eyes after having a stroke. Her eyes went back to normal. Even Faith, who was skeptical of the whole thing, her back pain dissipated and she healed. So this gives you a little example. This is a woman called Deb Malicio who took a class with me, did a 10-minute group intention this past summer. She was wheelchair bound with multiple sclerosis. Here's what happened.
My name is Deb Malicio, and I just went to the
Power of Eight intention
Power of Eight
here in Sedona, Arizona.
And I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and I want to show you what I'm doing with this.
Goodbye.
Bye.
So what do you,
walk. It was amazing, just totally amazing to me.
what was your diagnosis that you healed?
Sorry, I had MS. I've had MS since 1998.
So this is the second person I've seen get out of a wheelchair. And then what I started doing was putting people in Power of Eight groups for an entire year. And I found that all kinds of things in their lives were being healed, whether it was their health, their relationships, asking for relationships, finances, career, getting new careers and jobs, etc. Here's just a short clip of someone who was part of a group that was called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I like Beatles songs, so I usually name my groups after Beatles songs. Here's what Emalani said.
I'm in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and it's an amazing group. From the first get-go, we had amazing results. We had a woman get a lung that she had been waiting for a transplant forever in our first 2 weeks. We had a woman have cancer gone with it. That was our first 2 to 3 weeks of our group. It was so amazing.
And we've had thousands of miracles like that. But something else happens I want to talk to you about that has a lot to do with all of the polarization I've been talking about. Something else I noticed when I started doing intention experiments using different people. So I started out doing one for the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and I invited both Arabs and Americans to take part. And I started seeing them. Not only it was a very interesting experiment, and we did an experiment to lower violence in Afghanistan. That was interesting. And violence went down by an unprecedented level. That was also interesting, but not the point of the story. The point of the story was what happened with the Arabs and Israelis, the Arabs and Americans starting to talk to each other, starting to send love to each other, starting to forgive each other. So we then held one for the Middle East to lower violence in Jerusalem. And I called upon Dr. Salah al-Rashid, who is like the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East. He has an enormous following, and I was able to use special equipment so I could put cameras in conference rooms in 9 different locations. So we chose conference rooms in 8 different Arab cities, all through the nations in the Gulf, everything from Jordan to Kuwait to Saudi Arabia and so forth. And the 9th camera was in an audience filled with Israeli Jews. Now, when we were setting this up, the Israelis and the Arabs were barely speaking to each other. They didn't even want to talk to each other because, of course, they've grown up to hate each other. They've grown up to think the other side has horns growing out of their heads. So we set this up, and it was special equipment so that I could speak to them, they could speak to me, they could speak to each other. And we decided to focus on the old city of Jerusalem, which was experiencing a lot of violence, particularly the Damascus Gate area of the old city. So I led them in an intention, and I want you to watch what happened. So are you ready to begin now, everybody? Our intention is to lower violence and restore peace in the old city of Jerusalem by at least 10% or more. Imagine it with your 5 senses. See people putting down their weapons. See people restoring peace there. See people hugging each other, hugging strangers, reaching across the aisles. Hold those intentions in your mind as you imagine yourself holding the hands of everyone on either side of you. If you're watching on YouTube, imagine you're holding the hands of everybody, all the thousands of people on this call. Can you feel the connection? Are you seeing peace? We have someone from
Amman. This amazing experience. We all here crying at the room, our tears falling down.
Like a big party. I like to have fun, so I feel fun. I feel like I was young again. Like I'm in a big party.
Like a commercial that you see on the road, and it was written, the peace is already here. Yes.
Jeddah in Saudi Arabia.
I saw myself there, and I felt very strong love for the Jews, in spite of our raising up to hate the Jews. Beautiful feelings, beautiful images of unity, oneness, love, and peace.
We live in Jerusalem. We know it personally. And I've seen images of hugging, of soldiers and Arab people, of kindness one to another, of flowers all around Damascus Gate. This is so emotional. And I've seen the 4 quarters of the old city as the 4 rooms of my personal heart.
Yes, you're on Abu Dhabi.
Israelis are dancing, the Palestinians, they hug each other, and we are with the Israelis, like we share peace and love, which is an amazing thing. And I want to thank you and everybody participate in this participation.
Tunisia.
Yes, Tunisia. We saw a lot of children running and laughing. And there is a lot of butterflies and wearing a white clothes and running. And there is a lot of a loud voice of laughing.
You took me to the place I really love. I saw there a sunny day, lots of people laughing, lots of joy and happiness. I wish I could stay there. I wish I didn't come back.
My name is Fatima Salemi, and the peace in Arabic means salam, and my name is Salami. So I feel in peace, I feel in love. I love all people in the whole world. I love you so much, and I feel full of love and full of peace. Your God is my God. I love you.
My name is Lynne from Jerusalem. It's so overwhelming, the possibility to be connected with you, our sisters in Amman and in Damascus and in Iran
and all over. We are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women here saying enough. It's about time to unite. We are one. It's time of compassion.
So afterward, we had that experience go viral. It was all over Israel on the Israeli medium. It was all over the Arab media. We even had Kuwaiti MPs talking about how these little initiatives were bringing people together, polarized people, people who hated each other, bringing them together for peace. And one of the magazines even wrote in Israel, maybe it's small initiatives like this that can create peace, that can do what the politicians can't seem to achieve. So why are participants so affected? And this is the big question I asked. I was fascinated not only about those personal healings, but also the creation of love toward the entire world, so that suddenly they're hugging strangers, suddenly they're making up with estranged partners or children or parents. You know, they're feeling more love for everything and everybody. So why are they so affected? Well, I was influenced and I got an answer from the work of Dr. Dacher Keltner, who is a psychologist at the University of California at Berkeley. He did a fascinating study with two groups of his students. So one group were shown pictures like this, pictures of the world's victims, like starving children. The second group were shown pictures designed to elicit pride in who they were, pictures of the Berkeley campus, for instance, pictures of the Berkeley football team beating their nearest rivals, Stanford. And afterward, Keltner then showed each group different kinds of pictures of different types of people. And with group one, he found that they felt closest to and identified more with people not like them. So if they were Democrats, they also identified with Republicans. If they were Republicans, they also identified with Democrats. These middle-class students started identifying with the homeless, with prisoners. Their hearts were open. Whereas group two identified more strongly with fellow students or professionals, doctors, lawyers, business people, the people who they would become. So the people just like them. And what he explained to me was something really fascinating, which is that this all has to do with the vagus nerve. That's the longest nerve in the body. That starts at the neck and it winds all the way through all of the major organs of the body. And what happens is it's involved with the release of oxytocin, which is the love hormone. We have a release of oxytocin when we're caring for our young, for instance. But he found also when the vagus nerve is activated, that's essentially like the love nerve. It makes us more compassionate and more loving toward people not like me, not like you, people who are not like us. We begin to love and our heart leaps across the fence. So I've been really fascinated by my work, the work with large groups and small groups. And while I found that they are healing, both for senders and receivers, what I feel that something else that's going on that's even more exciting is how it can overcome the hatred in people's hearts. And that's what somebody wrote to me one time. They said, "You're doing more than research. You are breaking open people's hearts. So I feel that I am a gatekeeper for the power of intention, particularly the power of 8 and the power of small groups. I've seen thousands of miracles. But what's so fascinating is this is our birthright. This is something inside of all of us. This is a capacity that we have that just needs to be unleashed. So I really recommend you find a Power of 8 group and find out how you have this power inside of you to overcome these great divides. Thank you for listening. I just want to tell you about some of the things that I do. So if you haven't already, please read my books, my latest book, The Power of 8, or my other books, The Field,